All right, sorry we got disconnected by a battery failure. Getting back to the Chinese medicine defined properties of eggplant, fundamentally that it's cooling and it nourishes the yin. In fact, many things or almost all things that are cooling do nourish the yin, but there's a fundamental difference between cooling and overcooling. But let's not talk about that now. Um, Medical uses of eggplant. So number one, eaten in summer and spring if it's hot spring. In San Diego, where I am, May and June are actually not hot. But in other places, I mean, my God, when I was in Italy one summer in June, it was 100 degrees for a week. So in very hot weather, eggplant is eaten as one of the many foods you can eat to cool the system. Just like when it's hot out in this country, when it's hot out, what do we want? We want iced beverages, we want ice cream, we want frozen yogurt. And those are things that cool us but have pathological side effects. Eggplant in moderation, because by the way, in Chinese medicine, it's not recommended to eat eggplant all the time. It's not as often eaten. It's not taken as often as other vegetables like daikon radish or different vegetables that are without side effects. So there is considered to have a slight negative side effect that I'm not going to talk about right now, but just to understand that because some people watching this might bring up the issue of it being a nightshade. And indeed, Chinese medicine does not recommend nightshades all the time, but it doesn't, it's not fanatical about it. There's not a fear of nightshades. They're just avoided and taken as needed when needed, but not as the mainstay of the way you eat rice every day in China. Okay, so cooling. So number one, it's cooling and nourishes the yin, as does other vegetables that do that. Would be for other foodstuffs that do that would be dairy products, as I mentioned. Tofu is a really good example, and I'm going to make eggplant with tofu, which is classic. Now, tofu, by the way, is very cooling, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Sorry, I know I go on tangents. Other medicinal uses of eggplant are, because it nourishes the yin and it's cooling, it's used for headaches, especially migraines, because when people have migraine headaches, they have pathological tension in which heat rushes up to the head. That's why sometimes when people have bad migraines, their faces get red and their eyes get bloodshot. So it's used for people with chronic anger issues that can manifest as migraines and also as high blood pressure. And it's used for those issues as a food because of its quality of clearing out that pathological heat by cooling and nourishing the yin. Because of the very easy to digest fiber, it's also used to cleanse the intestines, and it's a good vegetable for people with hemorrhoid problems. And again, doesn't mean you should eat it every day if you have hemorrhoids, because there's lots of other choices that are very safe to eat all the time. But it's something that can be included, once a week, for example. And it has to do with the fact that hemorrhoids are, hemorrhoids are pathological heat. They're what we call damp heat in the intestine. And what's the evidence that there's pathological heat with hemorrhoids is that there's blood. And, there's blood where there shouldn't be blood. And it's the heat that's making the blood leak out, is how Chinese medicine looks at it. And I have to say, I've treated hemorrhoids a lot over the years, very successfully. And a lot of times people get them when they're under stress and exhausted. And when we're under stress, we tend to overheat. And they get them when they're under stress and exhausted, and also then dealing with stress by eating heat-producing foods. Besides the heat-producing foods I mentioned earlier, alcohol and sugar are both super concentrated fuel, therefore high in caloric content. And what is a calorie? A measurement of heat. And eggplant is very low in calories. Measurement of heat is calories. Therefore, it's one way that you could look at it as nourishing of the yin. Okay, so let's just talk very briefly about tofu. Tofu is also very cooling. Not so much because of the soybean itself as because of how it's processed, because the mineral that they use in tofu to make it coagulate, it's a kind of, what is it called again? Is it a magnesium? I'm suddenly spacing out on the name of the mineral. It is, hold on a second here. Well, anyway, the mineral that they use, I don't see the ingredients there. The mineral that's used to coagulate the soy milk into tofu, we use that same exact mineral in Chinese medicine for people with fevers. So it's very, very cooling, very, very cold, which again is why you will never see people in China, Japan, or Korea living on tofu. Vegetarians don't live on tofu. They live on a wide variety of things, including lots of vegetables and not grilled cheese, soy cheese sandwiches. And tofu is eaten in small amounts in East Asia, where people eat tofu, and it's eaten always with other things, and often always with other things that are warming. For example, like, oh wait, sorry, I have to turn this around now. Oh, do I know how to do that? Let me see if I can turn it around. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera around, but then I can't see what I'm doing. So bear with me for a moment. I'm going to pause this.